REC means it's recording.
Okay.
About 3 weeks ago, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about the urban farming guy from Boulder. Can you tell us more details about him? You know about him? Is that being replicated in other parts of Boulder or other cities of Colorado that you know?
Yeah, the story is about a man named Kip Nash, a young guy who's a school bus driver who lives within Boulder, but he's had a great passion to be a farmer. But he didn't see any way that he could be a farmer because he was stuck in a job, stuck living in the city of Boulder. And he finally got the idea to ask his neighbors if he could grow food in their lawns, front yard, backyard, and he's now got, I think, about 15 families that have allowed him to farm on their property. And he started this about 1.5 years ago, I guess, maybe 2 years, and he's gotten it to the point now where he actually has a neighborhood CSA. He is also selling produce at the farmers market in Boulder, and it's been covered in places like the Wall Street Journal and many other publications around the nation because it's such a positive story. It shows what can be done right now. It looks great to see a rather standard-looking suburban home with big lawn and the front lawn devoted to gardening. I mean, it's a powerful image, and it impacts people. They see that this can be done. So, of course, other people are beginning to emulate that, not only in Boulder but in other cities as well. And his enterprise is growing. He's got people coming to him more than he can handle who want him to farm on their lawns. So, you know, as an entrepreneur, he's kind of got a tiger by the tail that's growing very rapidly. But it's interesting how he's considered a local hero because of what he's created there. So hats off to Kip Nash.
You know, Richard Moore in his book Escaping the Matrix talked a lot about the Farmers Alliance, which was a very powerful organization throughout the country that was radical, and they just very, very knowledgeable about how things were working. And somehow the Grange movement also occurred around that time. Is there a renaissance like the Farmers Alliance? Is the Grange Hall involved in any of your food farming campaigns?
It's an interesting question. We've discovered that in Boulder County there are, I think, 9 Grange Halls that still exist. Ooh. And we have started working with one of them in a farming area called Altona. And we have had, for instance, we held a public dialogue there on the question, how will Boulder County feed itself beyond the age of cheap oil? It just seemed like an appropriate place to be doing that. Mm-hmm. But we hope to be able to reactivate the Grange to some degree. We're also working to bring together the key stakeholders in the local food system and develop, I mean, that would include the farmers, that would include the various organizations, distributors, retailers, and so on, to create the Boulder County Food Shed Alliance. Mm-hmm. So it really is an alliance of the key stakeholders in this, so that we can begin to develop the systems that are necessary to rebuild local agriculture. We're in Boulder County. We're very weak in distribution and storage systems, mm-hmm. and places where food can be processed and prepared. That kind of infrastructure just does not exist, and yet we know will be essential to rebuild the system. So the only way that can happen is if those who are integrally involved in the local food system come together to choose together to build these kinds of systems.
Yeah, that's one of the things in our county too. They need storage in order to provide food for the restaurants or for the schools.
Yeah.
We showed a film called Two Angry Moms about how food school directors are becoming more aware of how they can actually inquire from the schools where they're getting their food and actually changing the contracts so that if they want their children to eat local seasonal food, that there is a, quote, democratic process that can do that. Are many of the schools there doing these kinds of things in Boulder County?
It's just beginning. With one school system, the Boulder Valley School District, there is an effort to educate administrators of schools about the importance of bringing in local food, primarily for health impacts.
Mm-hmm. Obesity too.
Yeah, yeah. So that's beginning. It began with one of the farms in Boulder County, Abundanza Organic Seeds and Produce, working with one of the schools to develop an on-site garden, and then produce from that garden was used in the lunchroom. It was optional. It was a very small beginning, but very powerful. Again, it was a visible example that people could see, and a lot of children learned how to grow food as a process, in the process. So it's just beginning, but clearly institutions like schools and hospitals and prisons and major corporations who are serving people food can contribute greatly to people's health through bringing in local organic produce.
Yeah, if they did that, it would just remarkably increase the local farmers and what they can produce. Absolutely. I was talking to one farmer and they said, yeah, right now maybe I'm doing 2 rows of lettuce for a farmer's market, but if I knew some of the schools down the street wanted, the seasons full of lettuce, I could do 2-3 acres.
That's right. The farmers need to know that. I mean, I've talked to many of the farmers in Boulder County who say that they can do much more. They can grow much more in the way of organic produce. But for them to make the investment in the land, the equipment, the labor, the seeds and everything to do that, they've got to know that the market is going to be there. Otherwise, they're extending themselves too far with risk. So, sure, developing school lunch programs and other institutions, those can be major outlets for those farmers and can allow them to make the investment in expansion.
So tell us more about these gatherings, conferences that you've had to, educate people, bringing in music, bringing in local food, bringing in workshops, how successful they have been, and who are some of your supporters or funders, or you get grants from the county, or can you talk about that?
Broad question. Yeah, we last year in March we launched what we called the Boulder County Going Local campaign. It's a public, very public, educational kind of campaign around key themes like buy local first, to support local independent businesses, grow local, eat local, local energy, and local currency. So we've been organizing every month between 4 and 8 events, public education and awareness events around these themes. They might be films, about the global situation with energy and climate and economy. They might be panel discussions of experts addressing specific topics in Boulder County like water. We might bring in guest speakers like Richard Heinberg, the author of Peak Everything. We recently had James Howard Kunstler, Bill McKibben, others, and we're trying to make those as much as possible community events. So they're more celebratory. Often they're tied to a potluck dinner of local food. We are attempting more and more to bring in local music into these events. to bring a more of a cultural element into this. We're rebuilding community, and so we have to use many avenues to do that. Another aspect of the work that we've been doing is something called the Great Reskilling, which we've adopted from the Transition Towns movement, which began in the UK. And this is a very specific educational program designed to train people in some of the very basic life skills that our grandparents took for granted. Things like gardening, beekeeping, home repair, bicycle repair. We're looking at quilting now. Some people are looking at yarn spinning and weaving. You know, real basic life skills that enabled our grandparents and our ancestors to thrive without dependence on fossil fuels. And so we've had many courses and workshops so far this year. We launched this in February, and from February to the end of May, we delivered almost 1,000 hours of great reskilling instruction in actual classes.
Wow.
And we'll be doing much more of those. In terms of funding, it's been one of our biggest challenges. We have a pretty ambitious, robust relocalization effort. We are a nonprofit now, and it requires a lot of fuel, a lot of financial fuel to do all of this work. It requires a staff of full-time people. I mean, they're actually working much more than full-time, but if they can get paid for full-time, that would be great. We rely a lot on sponsorship from local companies. We are also launching a membership program similar to community-supported agriculture. We believe that the work of relocalization needs to be supported by the entire community as well. So we're developing community-supported relocalization, CSR. And we're launching a membership drive similar to what a public radio station would do, so that membership is just a vehicle for contribution, but it's also an opportunity for engagement and involvement in designing this process of transitioning off fossil fuels.
So one last question. The success of Transition Towns has been kind of exponential, remarkable. Just say a brief few words about that, and also just like ending with your website so people can find out more about what you're up to.
Sure. We've been watching the Transition Towns movement very closely since its inception in Kinsale, Ireland, with Rob Hopkins, when he worked at a community college teaching permaculture and got his students to develop an energy descent action plan for the town of Kinsale, which was then adopted by the town of Kinsale. He went on to Totnes, England, and began working on a community level there to have the community begin to design an energy descent action plan, and to declare that the whole town, they'll have a whole town declare that they would make this transition off fossil fuels, become a resilient community. And this has spawned a movement that now involves maybe as many as 600 or 700 communities in many different countries. We have just recently become the first transition initiative in North America. So we're tasked with anchoring that movement in the U.S. And I think that the power of it is it works to unleash the collective genius of a community through community-wide processes. So it's not just a small little relocalization group trying to do something. Instead, it is a community-wide effort. So it's very powerful to be able to say that our town or our city or our village has made the decision that we are going to transition off of fossil fuels, that we are perhaps going to become carbon neutral, that we are perhaps going to provide 50% of our own food by the year 2012 or something like this. But it's setting broad community goals, and I think that this gives people a very positive way to respond to the challenges of peak oil and climate change and economic chaos, which can be, without a very positive outlet, can be very overwhelming or even depressing.
And your website?
Yeah, you can find out more about what we're doing at BoulderCountyGoingLocal.com. I also recommend two other websites from Post Carbon Institute, relocalize.net, which was the original branch of the relocalization movement, and transitiontowns.org will bring you to the wiki of the transition movement in the UK.
Great, thank you, Michael, for being in beautiful Ecuador and bringing your wisdom to both Phoenix Gathering and to Hope Dance.
Thanks very much, Bob.
All right.